What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football schedule preview and very early projected record series. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights are up next. Before we look ahead to 2025, let's take a look back at what the Rutgers did in 2024. Here are my projections and predictions last year for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. My projection for this team was at 7-5, and then my prediction for them was also 7-5, and that's exactly what Rutgers did. I got the projection and the prediction right here for this Scarlet Knights team. They went 7-5 last year in the regular season, but if you count their bowl game loss at the end of the year, this team went 7-6 overall, but it was a pretty solid year for the Rutgers for 2024, and I think a big reason of that was because of the schedule that they had in 2024. They did not have a tough schedule last year. You look at this schedule from 2024. First off, you look at who they played in the non-conference. They played Howard and Akron, and then they also played Virginia Tech on the road. Of course, Virginia Tech ended up not being as good as we thought they were going to be. And yeah, Rutgers went on the road and beat Virginia Tech. That's a very tough place to play. And they started actually 4-0, and then they lost their their next 4 games, but they finished the season strong, and they were still able to make it to a bowl game. You look at the Big Ten schedule last year. You look at who they played at home in the Big Ten. They played Washington, Wisconsin, UCLA, and then also Minnesota and Illinois. So they had 5 home games last year in the Big Ten. They lost to Wisconsin, UCLA, and Illinois. Yeah, Wisconsin and UCLA were 2 5-7 teams. Wisconsin ended up not being as good as we thought they were going to be. UCLA had a first-year head coach. Illinois was a big surprise team, so yeah, that was a big surprise there. Then you take a look at the road schedule here for Rutgers. They played on the road at Nebraska, at USC, at Maryland, and at Michigan State, so 4 away games in the Big Ten. They lost to Nebraska and USC. Those are very tough places to play. Maryland wasn't really good last year. They beat them on the road, and then obviously Michigan State had a first-year coach as well. So again, a really easy schedule for Rutgers for 2024, but this year it's a little different. This schedule is a lot more tougher compared to last year. You look at this schedule, before we go game by game, let's take a look at who the Scarlet Knights play in the non-conference. So this is their non-conference schedule. They will play Miami of Ohio University Redhawks, and then they play Norfolk State. So one FCS team in there, and then they got a couple of teams here in the MAC. I wouldn't say these are pretty easy games for Rutgers. Ohio and Miami of Ohio Redhawks were really good last year out of the MAC. They have been now for, the last couple years. So maybe those are 2 games that Rutgers could probably struggle in, but they should be absolutely big favorites in both of those games still. Maybe they're just not really, favored by even 20 plus like they're going to be favored against Norfolk State. So again, non-conference schedule, not too bad here for the Rutgers for 2025. Let's now take a look at their home games in the Big Ten. They will play Iowa, Oregon, Maryland, and Penn State all at home this year in the Big Ten. So 4 home games in the Big Ten Conference. You look at Iowa and Maryland, those are probably winnable games here for the Scarlet Knights, but 2 big home games, Oregon and Penn State, potentially going to be top 10 teams. So yeah, those are 2 tough home games there for the Rutgers. That's what makes the schedule a lot more tougher compared to last year when you got to the 2 teams that made it to the college football playoff, and then also the 2 teams that made it to the Big Ten championship last year. So a pretty tough home schedule, but you got a couple of winnable games in there with Maryland and Iowa. Let's now take a look at their road schedule in the Big Ten. They will play on the road at Minnesota, at Washington, at Purdue, at Illinois, and then also on the road at Ohio State. So 5 road games in the Big Ten for the Scarlet Knights. You look at the 4 games, maybe 3 out of the 5 games on this away schedule, Minnesota, Washington, and Purdue, those are probably winnable games here for the Scarlet Knights. But Illinois and Ohio State are going to be really tough road games. Illinois was a pretty big surprise last year, so obviously the Scarlet Knights will be out for revenge in this game. Illinois might not be as good as they were last year, but this is a team that's getting a lot of hype already. They do have a good amount of production coming back, and they probably could be like a preseason top 25 team. And then obviously Ohio State, they won't be as good as they were last year, but Playing on the road at Ohio State and Columbus, that's a very tough place to play. So yeah, a couple of games that Rutgers might not have a chance in, but I think Illinois is probably a slim chance they can probably, somehow pull off the upset there. But yeah, Purdue, Washington, and Minnesota, very winnable games on this away schedule. It's not quite as bad as I think as the home schedule is. So that's your away schedule in the Big Ten. Let's now go back to the schedule here and go full game by game now for the Scarlet Knights. They'll open up on a Thursday against Ohio there on August the 28th. Then they got Miami of Ohio University Redhawks on September the 6th. Then they play Norfolk State on September 13th. So they play all three of their non-conference opponents in the first 3 weeks of the season. So there's a really good chance that maybe Rutgers can get off to a 3-0 start before going into the rest of their Big Ten schedule. They will open up Big Ten play against Iowa on September the 20th. Then they go on the road for the first time. They'll play Minnesota here on September 27th. And then they get a bye week before going out west to play Washington on October the 11th. That's a pretty good spot for a bye week right there before having to go out west and everything to travel to Seattle, Washington and everything. Yeah, I like that spot there for the bye week for the Rutgers. And then they got Oregon the next week at home on October the 18th. Then they got Purdue on the road on October 25th. Also on the road at Illinois on November 1st. So they got back-to-back road games there with Purdue and Illinois. I think Purdue is definitely a winnable game, but Illinois is definitely going to be a very tough road game. That's a pretty tough place to play. So yeah, those are probably two tough trap road games there in back-to-back weeks there for the Scarlet Knights. Next week they play Maryland at home on November 8th, and then they get a bye week right before playing on the road at Ohio State. That's also a pretty good spot for a bye week before playing the Buckeyes, but even with a bye week, I don't think the Rutgers might have a chance in this one. So, yeah, that's a game that Rutgers will definitely be a big underdog in. They will play the Buckeyes there on November 22nd. And then they close things out with Penn State at home on November 29th. So, this is a much tougher schedule compared to last year for the Rutgers. I wouldn't just say tough. This is a brutal schedule for the Rutgers, in my opinion. It could be one of the toughest schedules definitely in the Big Ten. And it also could be one of the toughest schedules in the country. Maybe it's not there at number one, but I'd probably say at least in the top 5 perhaps. But again, Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State, 3 of the top teams in the Big Ten from last year. You play them on this schedule. You get Penn State and Oregon at home, but you got to play Ohio State on the road. Again, this schedule is tough, but what makes this schedule from getting any worse is the non-conference. They have a pretty easy non-conference schedule in my opinion. So let's now get a projection here for the Rutgers for 2025. This is the scale I'll be using here for their official projection. If it's basically a 1% game in the red, that's pretty much going to be counted as an automatic loss. 20% in the orange, they'll be a double-digit underdog by 10 to 14 points. And then your 40% games in the yellow, they'll be a clear underdog in that percentage. So by less than a touchdown, 6 or 7 points. Then your 50-50 games, those will stay in the white, games that really could go either way. 60% in the purple, that's where Rutgers will be favored by less than a touchdown, 6 or 7 points. And then your 80% in the blue, they'll be favored by double digits. And then 99% in the green, I think they'll be pretty much big favorites. Those are pretty much guaranteed wins and also automatic wins. So we'll start with the easy wins here for Rutgers. I think you got 3 of those. You got Ohio, Miami of Ohio University Redhawks, and then Norfolk State. I think the 2 games, Ohio and Miami University Redhawks, I think those 2 games are definitely over that, not over that 95% mark, but they're definitely close to being in the blue for me. I was really close to putting these 2 games in the blue, but because they're at home, that's the reason why they both fall in the green. But I wouldn't be surprised if Rutgers probably slipped up in one of these 2 games. Again, these are 2 group of 5 teams that were really good last year, and I think they're going to give the Scarlet Knights a little bit of problems. I still think Rutgers will be a big favorite in them by, let's say, 17 plus points, maybe even 20, but I think they'll be favored over 20 points by, against Norfolk State. That's a game they probably should be able to win pretty easily. That game is definitely over that 95 to 99% range. And then the 2 group of 5 games in the non-conference, those are probably in that 90 to 94% range. So yeah, those won't be 2 games that are pretty easy for Rutgers. They're not guaranteed wins, but we still count them as wins either way in this projection for 2025. So those are your 3 green games there for Rutgers, and then you look at the rest of the schedule. There's not really any other games on here. Again, this is a very tough schedule for Rutgers. You cannot favor, in any other games by double digits here for the Scarlet Knights, and then also favor them by less than a touchdown at 6 or 7 points. But there are games that we're going to be underdogs in. So I don't have any games in the red, but I do have one game here in the orange. That's going to be Ohio State here on the road. So yeah, I don't think Rutgers will have a chance in this one. This game probably could be in the red as well, but I'm going to put it in the orange for right now just because Rutgers was a pretty average team last year. They're definitely not on Ohio State's level, but that's a game I think Rutgers will be a double-digit underdog just because it's on the road. So I got to put them as a double-digit underdog. So 10 to 14 points, somewhere in that particular range. It could be more than that, though. It could be probably like 14 to 17 points, to be honest. But yeah, I think the Rutgers will be a double-digit underdog on the road at Ohio State. And then we go to the games where I think Rutgers will be a 6 or 7 point underdog, so by less than a touchdown in the yellow. I think you got 2 of those, Oregon and Penn State. Because these games are at home, that's the reason why Rutgers will be a clear underdog in both of them. Now, I'm not saying that Rutgers will have a chance to pull off the upset, but because they're at home, that's the reason why they are both in the yellow. But yeah, Oregon and Penn State are 2 very talented teams. They're way more talented than Rutgers are. And again, I'm not saying that Rutgers will upset them, but these are 2 games. Maybe they can win 1 or 2 of them. I don't think they can win both of them. Maybe they can win one of these 2 games, but as of right now, I don't really see them winning it. Again, I know they're in the yellow. They should be probably, be able to pull off an upset in one of these 2 games. But as of right now, I just don't think they can. Penn State and Oregon are definitely clearly more talented teams, and I don't know if the Rutgers are on any of these teams' level. Again, Oregon and Penn State are just way too more talented. So yeah, those 2 games, though, they'll be a less than a touchdown underdog in both of them by 6 or 7 points just because they're playing at home. That's the reason why they both fall in the yellow. And then that's going to leave you with a total of 6 50-50 games that really could go either way. You got Iowa, Minnesota, Washington, Purdue, Illinois, and Maryland. So yeah, 3 out of these 6 games, I think they can probably win these 50-50 games, which does bring me to my projected record here for the Scarlet Knights. Again, we count the green games as wins, and then you average out these 2 yellow games at 40%. You count the Ohio State game as a loss, but then you average out all these 50-50 games at 50%. Like I said, I think they split these 50-50 games, and they win like 3 out of the 6. So that's going to give you a total of 6 wins, including the green games. So that's going to give you a projection of 6-6 here for the Scarlet Knights for 2025. I think that's a pretty fair projection. Now, 5-7 definitely was really close here for the Scarlet Knights just because of how very tough this schedule is and how brutal it really can get here for the Scarlet Knights. But I think if they go 5-7, that's definitely, maybe not a disappointing year because of how tough this schedule is. But if they do worse than that, like 4-8 or 3-9, for example, that might be a disappointing year for the Scarlet Knights, but if they do a lot better than that, like if they go to a bowl game at 6-6 somehow with this tough schedule, that is a really good season. And also, if they go 7-5 over 6-6, that would definitely be even a more impressive season here for the Scarlet Knights. But yeah, 6-6 is what the projection is for the Scarlet Knights for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.